are always just?
Yes, ma'am.
Then how dare you question the fact? Sit down.
And so we aren't surprised when...
But it must be true. I saw it in this book right here.
Education our children are going to get has nothing to do with education. It is training our children to be resources, human resources, that's the way they refer to us, to spin off profits for the globalists.
The greatest barrier to discovery is not ignorance. It's the illusion of knowledge. And that's what the 15,000 hours of compulsory schooling really entrains and conditions into us, is that you've been told this story of the people in South America. And so you think you know about it. And it's not until later in life when you might come across more information about conquistadors and how Jesuits infiltrated all the religious systems and took all the riches out and basically harvested this whole area. And this is an example of plunder in South America that went on for hundreds of years. So until you have this other piece of information to bring this into focus, you think that what you were taught in public schooling during that 15,000 hours is really what's going on. And it's not until you pump up against reality, as George Orwell said, usually on a battlefield, that you consider that which you were taught to believe versus the objective evidence that exists.
Was an award-winning educator in New York who took kids and made them top-level students. And then he discovered that shut down the whole tax-free foundations so they couldn't teach the children this information. He discovered that it was by design that they were dumbing people down to make them subservient biological androids or replicants. That's what we're seeing this. But now we're obsolete. We're going to phase down the new robotic systems, the drone aircraft, the drone submarines, the drone ships, the drone robots on the ground, all being conditioned, all being acclimated for this.
In The Underground History of American Education, John Taylor Gatto details how, in the early 19th century, American travelers abroad were writing on the methodology of Prussian schools. Published his Report on the State of Public Instruction in Prussia, which not only led to the consolidation of French schools under the Prussian model, but also to reformers like Horace Mann in the United States to follow suit. Mann traveled to Prussia and, without even seeing one classroom instruction, sought to adopt the Prussian model of education with his annual reports given to the Massachusetts State Board. Mann's promotion of the concept that the state is the father of children was reinforced and expanded by educational reformers throughout the 19th and 20th century.
When we speak about enculturated processes, when we talk about imprinting, of course, I'm an educator. One of the things that surprises a lot of people, and it should, because it's probably enough, is that our education system is not about educating as much as it is about socializing. Like the duckling in the chicken yard. If you take that duckling and raise it with the chickens, it's going to be imprinted, it's going to behave like the chicken. In that very real sense, we perpetuate this. The danger is we don't just perpetuate it, we don't just enculturate it, but it's the only sane way we see to raise our children. And the result is there's no escaping it.
C.S. Lewis said, when training, which is Skinner, beats visualization,
Secure your copy today.
essential that we support independent pro-liberty film, a Veritas-type film. You can buy State of Mind on DVD or on Blu-ray. By calling toll-free 888-533-1159. Subscriber to PrisonPlanet.tv. Also have it archived here on the site. But it is so important that you vote with your dollars. The globalists take your money and give it as stimulus to MSNBC to put out anti-family, anti-self-defense, pro-tyranny messages. Same thing goes on with National Public Radio. I'm funded by them. I'm funded by patriots who love freedom worldwide like you. So I want to thank everyone that is a PrisonPlanet.tv subscriber. Operation Sleeping Giant, one membership, $595 a month. 11 you can log on with some username and passcode. I want to encourage you all to go to InfoWarsStore.com to get your copy on DVD or Blu-ray. You also have that in your library. And again, most filmmakers I have on, most filmmakers who I sell their film, not authorized us to be here and here on the show. But B, put it on YouTube. They authorized us to put this whole discussion of the film tonight on YouTube because they want to reach people. That's the currency they're looking for, is to free minds, to empower people. That's civilization. Slave-based systems want to keep people in the dark. And going back to Richard Crowe, the writer, and Austin Green, one of the producers on this, I just don't get, we talked about this on the radio last time you were on, using knowledge to suppress people when Migrate Drill is empowering them. It is the ultimate in selfishness. Then I want to talk about what are the methods of conditioning and dumbing down in the classroom.
Well, what you're talking about as far as dumbing down is taking thinking out of in between stimulus and response, which makes us automatons and makes us slaves in every way, shape, and form.
Slaves to stimulus.
Absolutely. And in between stimulus and response, it's that space that gives you choice and freedom and liberty and all the things that we need. But because we as conscious human beings have to use reason to survive. We have to effectively plan for the future, and we have to know what knowledge looks like in order to dismiss the arbitrary and find the
Let me dumb that down for me. Okay, because folks may not know these terms. Stimulus is you ring the bell, the dog salivates because you've given him the meat over and over again. And their big lie, we don't have free will. Well, wait, they want to take over. They have free will. It's a mind game that you're just our slaves.
It's a ploy. They condition human beings through operant conditioning much the same as they can train pigeons to look like they're reading and pecking at words because it's but that's only a human being when they're not thinking. If you question the psychological warfare, if you question the neurolinguistic programming, if you question the corporate media that you see on TV and all over the newspapers and all around you in your life, in your family's life, then you can free yourself from the system. So the damage done to 15,000 hours in classrooms in Prussian education and the servile mentality.
Look at the camera right there and tell them what Prussian education is.
Prussian education. Prussia, before it was Germany in the late 1860s, it was called Prussia. And it was a bunch of different city-states that were all kind of at war. And finally, they got together through militarizing and using force, fraud, and aggression to attain their goals. And this was working really well until Napoleon defeated the Prussian army at the Battle of Jena in 1806. From that, the Prussian government and people like Karl Clausewitz, who wrote on war, they went out and decided, hey, we can't have people on the battlefield who will run away from weapons and won't fight for their country. We need to nationalize their mentality. We need to break the individuality and the sovereignty of those individuals. We need to make them submit through force, fraud, and coercion. Compulsory schooling was the model that they made successful, and it later resulted in the Nazis.
That's right. Our modern educational system is a military brainwashing program on record. Kindergarten, all of it. Well, I just grew up in this. Well, let me tell you, it's the opposite of freedom. It's Germans. I'm part German. The point is, it was a technology corrupt people used to take over the Germans. It's like the global model is a British Empire model. It's part English. I'm not against the British people. Don't skip that too. Like you're like, I don't like what the communist Chinese are doing. What, you don't like Chinese people? You know, I don't like what Hitler did. What, you don't like Germans? Again, that's operant conditioning. Don't be racist. Just to get you people out there watching off of the real info. You don't like government-run healthcare? You're a racist. You don't want to turn your guns in? You're a racist. That's that conditioning, that buzzword again.
Observing this phenomenon that goes on and its prevalence, we should give it a name. This idea that you're putting your finger on it, it's the philosophic corruption of our reality. It's the fact that people don't value truth anymore. They say they do, but they won't go through the work to actually realize it and do the learning, which results from asking questions.
Austin.
I think that the condition repetition of taking away your individuality. Anytime somebody in school tries to speak an original thought or question what the teacher has to say, they're immediately punished, they're immediately chastised. This happens over and over and over.
And it's this worship of authority where they've done, as you know, 2 different covered film university experiments where people would kill people under orders. Authority figure told them. The authority figure told me to mow their lawn, I'd tell them no. They tell university students, kill that person, and they'll do it. I mean, this is incredible.
Well, there's 2 aspects. There's an MK Ultra aspect where you could train someone to actually kill and eat their parents, and then there's the everyday advertising war that we're all exposed to through any magazine or newspaper or television ad that we see on TV. So all these things come, it's like a coincidentia positorum. You have scientific management coming through MK Ultra, top-down in intelligence agencies, and you have cyborg coming in from the marketing companies, and they make a very easy living off of the unwitting attitude.
There's layers and layers of programming. It's just incredible, meant to just overwhelm you till you just give up.
And this is a great tool to peel off those layers, one layer at a time, as you learn how to.
And the fun is, once you know the programming, you learn the cop doesn't know what they're doing. They're programmed too. The bureaucrat doesn't know, and they like short circuit when you know the programming and they don't. But instead of using that programming to enslave them, you use it to unlock their mind.
The fundamental choice that human beings have is to think or not to think. So we all have the ability to think. If you choose not to ask the questions, if you choose to be servile, and you want to give away other people's rights that you don't have the right to do, that's fine. You can do that, but expect other people to resist, the people who are aware of how things work and how logic and reason should be, advanced in this world.
That's right. Just because you've been put through dog training at the TSA to be a slave, prisoner training, doesn't mean I'm going to go along with it. And I notice with these sheep, sometimes they get mad when I wake people up about what's happening, and then later they go, no, I agree with you. It's like once they see me not bow to their peer pressure, they have like mass Stockholm syndrome. Then they grovel to me, and I go, no, I don't want you to be my prisoner. I don't want my kids growing up in a world with a bunch of slaves. Stop
Although education has proven to be highly effective in controlling human behavior, more intensive research would need to be conducted away from the prying eyes of the public.
The Tavistock Institute was set up by the British Empire to really study mind control and to scientifically drill down into human behavior and put in textbook form systems of basic control so that could be duplicated out to government and corporate entities. And Tavistock has been involved at every level of social engineering.
The Tavistock Clinic was founded in 1920 and operated as part of the Psychological Warfare Division of the British military. It was initially a voluntary outpatient clinic for treatment and research and was made up of general physicians, neurologists, and psychiatrists to facilitate the treatment of neurosis and shell-shocked British soldiers returning home from World War I.
Going through their own publications on Amazon, you can find that some of their books cost like $18,000, $20,000. And what that tells me is they don't want the average person to be anywhere near getting their hands on this book, because what it gives you inside those books is the teacher's edition, to use an abstraction, as opposed to the students sitting around the class not knowing what the answers to the questions are. There's a group of people who are being given the answers to all the questions about how we act, react, and how we've been understimulated with curiosity in order to make us more subordinative.
You could say much of our world today is the world of the Tavistock Institute and Edward Bernays.
Instrumental in the Tavistock Clinic and director of the Tavistock Institute of Human Relations. It was former officer and consulting psychiatrist to the British Army, John Rawlings Rees, who created the concept of the psychological shock troops, or culture warriors, a federation of psychiatrists, which he intended to disperse across the globe to make it, quote, possible for people of every social group to have treatment when they need it, even when they do not wish it, without it being necessary to invoke law. The Tavistock Institute's influence did not stop simply at social psychology. Kurt Lewin, former head of Britain's Psychological Warfare Bureau, was a German refugee who became the founder of modern social psychology in the 20th century, an early consultant to the OSS, and an influential researcher with the Tavistock Institute in the area of management thinking and action research, specifically focused on the tactics of managing change within society. No organization of the size and scope of Tavistock can operate for long without ample funding. From whom is that funding derived? Certainly no small part comes from the seemingly benign, tax-exempt foundations of the global elite.
I was researching the Reese Committee back in like 1952, 1953, where they went in and investigated major foundations and some of their subversive activities. These foundations put an enormous amount of energy into controlling what is being taught at the schools and how it's being taught, and preparing, using schools basically to indoctrinate children to accept their station in life, to accept a collectivist future.
According to Dr. Lily Kay, whose expertise was demonstrated in her 1993 book, The Molecular Vision of Life, the Rockefeller Foundation, Caltech, and the New Molecular Biology, the world in which we are living has been molded, shaped, and continues to be directed by an elite establishment of eugenicists, a ruling class fueled by violating the will of others to attain their goals.
Nowadays, almost every adult agrees on one basic goal for all students.
Schools ought to turn out good citizens.
Yes, good citizens.
That's right. Absolutely. This country always needs good citizens.
The real goal was to change America from an individualist system into a collectivist system, and in which case it could be merged with the rest of the world, and there would be this great new world order that we hear so much about in recent years.
The purpose of creating tax-exempt foundations was not just to collect more money, but to invisibly assert influence over the power centers which control the programming of individuals, specifically to breed the self-reliance out of individuals and prepare them for the collectivist lifestyle planned by the ruling class. Their goal: to undermine personal liberty on biological, social, and economic levels.
They came together and decided what they were going to do with this money was to gain control of education in America, not for a philanthropic purpose, but to change the thinking of the American people over a generation or two.
Globalist socialism is hunger, the desire, coveted power that the liberty in the U.S. had created. They wanted to take it over. And the tax-free foundations wanted to use it as an engine of global domination, and they've done that. And the Reese committees were the only time when Congress stood up constitutionally and demanded all the big foundations come testify and open their private books. And the Rockefeller, the Carnegie, the Ford Foundation, they all came and said, look, we're here under presidential directive from more than 50 years ago. We've been told to collectivize the United States, to merge it with the Soviet Union. We've been told to make America more compatible with authoritarian regimes. We're just doing what we were chartered to do.
Until the creation of language, brute force held the key to fear, and thus to the control of individuals through violence and physical aggression. With the innovation of language, the minds of individuals could be harnessed with ideas and beliefs, making less significant the physical dominance of previous generations. This is how, for example, men of small stature could keep otherwise brave and ferocious gladiators as household slaves, whose deaths could be used for profit and entertainment. Out of the ashes of World War II rose the specter of human experimentation in the form of the 1939 to 1945 exodus of Nazi intelligentsia to continue their research and experimentation under the protection of national security. Being denazified, they were given new identities to live
you brought one of them, Ron, over here, and several other scientists, including those that were involved in the concentration camp medical experiments, including mind control experiments.
A lot of these guys were, as far as the State Department was concerned, war criminals. Worked directly to the Nazis, and therefore couldn't get visas, couldn't come into the United States. So the CIA set up this series of programs to route everybody around the State Department visa requirements getting into the country.
Everybody knows about the race at the end of World War II to get Nazi scientists. The Russians wanted them, the United States and England wanted them. And the United States and England got most of them, because the Nazis didn't want to go to the Soviet Union and another authoritarian system. They wanted to go to a, quote, freer system. And like an infection, they came to England, Canada, and the United States. And it wasn't just over NASA and rocketry with Werner von Braun and Goddard and others. It was tens of thousands in mind control and torture and military science and surveillance. And the CIA got modeled to a great extent of the Gestapo. So we see really the Nazis being transplanted to the United States and England, where the eugenics philosophy that they had embraced had originally sprung.
The Office of Strategic Services, the precursor of the CIA, under the direction of William Wild Bill Donovan and Allen Dulles, recruited Nazi scientists and aided their importation and training abroad. Among them were rocket scientist Werner von Braun and the aeronautical physician Fritz Strindberg.
The problem the United States was facing was all these German scientists who were kind of loose, repository, and the French, the British, the Russians, trying to recruit them.
Germans had some advanced weapons, but also a lot of experimentation on human beings in the concentration camps. So a lot of people got into it and had the rocket scientists and the airplane scientists and all the rest of it. Paperclip was all over going into Europe and finding these guys and bringing them to the United States to work.
Well, missing the documentation, we have physicians, aerospace medicine people, film people, librarians, projectors, experts, all kinds of scientists. All from the story of psychiatrists. And most of them psychiatrists been living very strictly in the paperclip.
Even the political support that was, to some extent, possible to American influence. World War II, the American financiers, corporations, decided that there was money to be made on pre-war Germany. After all, they knew that Germany was preparing to become a military aggressor. It needed money to construct vehicles of war. They were spending a lot of money designing and building tanks and airplanes, military carriers and things like that, submarines, ships, and there was money to be made. So Wall Street and some of the largest corporations like AT&T and even Ford Motor Company were involved with the Nazi regime.
The experiment that went on became known as Nazi Germany starts in World War I and the Versailles Treaty in Paris 1919. Basically giving the Germans the short end of the stick, giving them more reparations that they can't possibly pay. Totally unrealistic. Now, this famous German banker named Helmar Schacht gets together with a guy from the Bank of England named Montague Norman, and they create something in 1932 called the Bank for International Settlements. This is a clearinghouse for all the national debts, but really it's being used to launder money. And then is that same group, Helmar Schacht, becomes Hitler's banker. So Hitler is totally financed by these people who are making their lives out of pulling the wool over other people's eyes. And at the same time, they want to have the National Socialist experiment to test out the Prussian education system that they're using and about to roll out all over the world.
Following the 1945 completion of Operation Paperclip, the CIA created MK-Ultra, a top-secret mind control research project which was managed by Sidney Gottlieb under the direction of Allen Dulles. The program began in the early 1950s, was officially sanctioned in 1953, and officially terminated in 1973. The program engaged in many illegal, unethical, and immoral activities. In particular, it used unwitting U.S. and Canadian citizens as its test subjects, which led to controversy regarding its legitimacy. MKUltra involved the pioneering of many methodologies to manipulate individuals' mental states and alter brain functions, including the surreptitious administration of psychoactive drugs and other chemicals, hypnosis, sensory deprivation, isolation, verbal and sexual abuse, and other various forms of torture.
When I interviewed John Marks about the search for the Manchurian Candidate, he said a very interesting thing to me. He had been given 10 boxes of CIA information on a Freedom of Information Act request, not his first. He had been trying to get this kind of information on the mind control program of the CIA in the 50s, 1950s, for a long time. And finally, as a kind of a sop, maybe even a joke, they gave him 10 boxes of materials that had nothing to do with the projects except the accounting data, the financial data, thinking that Marx wouldn't be able to do it. The CIA would be perceived to have to fulfill the request. Marx was too smart for him. He saw into the financial data and realized what he had his hands on, that this was not only MKUltra mind control program of the CIA, but it was divided up into many, many, many sub-projects. And he had some of the funding details that provided the foundation for him to move forward with research and discover what they were really up to.
The military started the Artichoke Project and the Bluebird projects, which I think was the Navy one, and they were trying to figure out, can we make a Manchurian Candidate? Can we make a super soldier? Can we control what people think and do and how they act on the battlefield? Can we make somebody braver than they really are? It was getting up to where they were asking questions, can we create kamikazes like the Japanese had?
In 1994, President Clinton created the Advisory Committee on Human Radiation Experiments, which was tasked with investigating the instances of federally funded research using ionizing radiation on human beings. Based on the documents made available to the committee, they identified nearly 4,000 cases of human radiation experiments taking place between 1944 and 1974. This included a series of federally funded experiments in which unsuspecting hospital patients were injected with plutonium. Many details of MKUltra experimentation were disclosed during a public hearing before the advisory committee.
I'm going to start. My name is Valerie Wolf. In listening to the testimony today, it all sounds really familiar. I am here to talk about a possible link between radiation and mind control experimentation that began in the late 1940s. The main reason that mind control research is being mentioned is because people are alleging that they were exposed as children to mind control, radiation, drugs, and chemical experimentation, which were administered by the same doctors who are known to have been involved in conducting both radiation and mind control research. Written documentation has been projects in several places across the country. It is also important to understand that mind control techniques and follow-ups into adulthood may have been used to intimidate these particular research subjects into not talking about their victimization in government research.
People talk about MKUltra in two senses. It's kind of like an umbrella term for all mind control programs. But technically, it's just a specific program that ran in the 60s. And therefore, MKUltra could not be operational today. But something like MKUltra with a different name surely must be. And I don't think there's any doubt in my mind at all. Clearly, mind control methods are used at Guantanamo Bay. I mean, there's all the hallmarks of mind control. There's hooding, there's forced sitting positions, There's sensory deprivation, sleep, sexualizing the interrogation, subjecting them to things that go against their religious faith, waterboarding. So all the components of a mind control program are in place there. The hearings were really about that, and the women didn't have solid evidence, but they told the kind of stories that I hear over and over from mind control victims.
So Claudia Mullen and Christine Nicola get up on the stage in Washington, and they say, yes, radiation, but it's only one part of mind control experiments that we were and then pretty much, thank you very much, and now we move on to the next witness. Like, pretend none of this took place.
In the 19th century, Franz Mesmer's brand of hypnotism entertained countless audiences, which consequently evolved, both covertly and overtly, throughout the 20th century. The CIA's Dr. George Estabrook, a graduate of Harvard University and a Rhodes Scholar, finally created reliable hypnotism, enabling its application to the science of social control.
George Estabrook was a Canadian-born psychologist whose career was at Colgate University in State New York. As early as 1943, in his textbook Hypnotism, he described in great detail, going back to the Second World War, taking to create a new personality. So he calls that Jones A and Jones B. And the new program personality would be given an assignment, which could be a career, penetration, any kind of assignment. And the out front regular complete lack of knowledge of the assignment.
Estabrook was a leading authority on hypnosis, programming soldiers during World War II to act as couriers who were not aware they were hypnotized operatives on a mission. In this manner, the OSS targeted political objectives through the covert methods of assassination and espionage, leveraging the science of hypnotism. Where hands-off hypnotic and pharmacological methods fail, the physical application of actual electrical stimulus directly to the brain becomes the next logical step. In 1964, Yale neuroscientist Jose Delgado implanted radio-controlled electrodes into the brain of an aggressive bull in an attempt to control its behavior in a ring with a matador. With the push of a button, Delgado himself was able to stop the bull in mid-charge.
Staring off into space, vacant. Whether she's strumming on a guitar, whether she's pounding on the wall.
That allowed him to target specific emotions and regulate behavior by aiming radio
fascism, this is going to be the next step in evolution.
Dr. Donald William Cameron was a Scottish-born psychiatrist who was president of the American Psychiatric Association from 1952 to 53, and later first president of the World Psychiatric Association. Cameron was directly involved in the brainwashing attempts of Central Intelligence Agency's top-secret anti-ultra mind control program. From Sidney Gottlieb and finally from the CIA funded through various other organizations. He spent years researching and experimenting
The CIA funded a series of experiments. Institute's then director, Dr. Ewan Schaefer. It is the closest experimentation to brainwashing yet disclosed. His work, unprecedented in psychiatry, consisted of driving and the ultimate deep learning. Dr. Maurice Dongier, current head of the Allen Memorial Institute.
In his psychic driving, so-called type of therapy, he would give the patient intensive attempt to implant new ideas in the mind of the patient.
Now, to a layman, Dr. Cameron was trying to take the slate and wipe it clean. The slate, in other words,
exactly, that's a very good comparison.
Secure your copy today at Infowars.com. We are premiering State of Mind right now. Don't forget you can get it on DVD or on Blu-ray exclusively at InfoWarsStore.com. And every order also gets other extremist material, the Citizen Rulebook with jury notification information, juries as the facts. Isn't that if you think a lot of information as a jury, that's your emergency. Don't want you to know. Infowarsstore.com. You can also call toll free 24 hours a day, 888-253-3139. Now, I wanted to ask James Lane and Richard Grove, what information did they garner from MK Ultra, one of many programs we know about, and how do we see that manifest today?
Well, I think one of the hierarchies that you see was Dr. Ewan. His protege was Dr. Jolyon West. Now, his protege was Dr. John Smith, and there's this whole line of these guys. Now, Ewan Cameron and Jolly West pioneered the 3Ds: dependency, debilitation, and dread. Right? And this is what's used today in Guantanamo Bay. It makes sense that John Smith was the head of the psychiatric unit there. Now, Jolly West was an interesting character because he actually worked with Patty Hearst, Saran, Jack Ruby, and was actually consulted with the defense team with Timothy McVeigh. So it seemed like every time one of these events occurred, they bring this guy in and kind of handle the damage control.
How obvious is that?
I mean, plain as a nose in your face. But those 3Ds, I mean, now how these people go to hospitals to try to get help, doing these experiments on them. I mean, this has all come out in the open.
Well, they take them to other countries. They would move them around. They would grab people's it was
Canada. I mean, these people were actually trying to help. And Cameron tried to just walk away and then build a new personality. And then come to find out, this is all part of the MK Ultra experiment. This guy is the head of every type of psychiatric organization in the country. So policy is definitely being dictated.
The things they did are just amazing. I mean, electroshock, one dose of it. I mean, this is like inside the head with a ball-peen hammer. Richard, your take on it.
I'm trying to discover the pioneers of the They basically, they want to take human beings' mentality and program a new one. It's like a hard doing some electroshock therapy, and it's all about breaking people's will and making them submit to. And part of the psychological warfare is that it gets a lot of people in public to support that instead of asking questions.
And who gives them the right to abuse us? People like the UN, above the law, diplomatic community, these globalists. Steal $1 trillion, become a world. Steal $1, get arrested.
When they get power by being able to predict our activities through predictive programming, through collecting all this information, through these experiments, they can predict how people will react in certain situations. They can plan on that, and they can. Until the herd outgrows that mentality, it's very predictable, and they're not going to change it unless you resist.
Well said, Richard. We'll get back to more of the State of Mind. Secure your copy today at Infowars.com.
Ewan Cameron was a psychiatric contractor. Officially, it says that he didn't have top secret clearance, but I'm sure that in fact he did. The reason I say that is he was at different times president of the Quebec Psychiatric Association, the Canadian Psychiatric Association, the Society of Biological Psychiatry, and the World Psychiatric Association.
You and Cameron were the famous psychiatrists in the world in the 1950s. You name a psychiatric association of any size or scope, he was the president of it.
He was a psychiatrist. He, in fact, at one time, he was the president of the Psychiatric Foundation. He was immigrating over here from Scotland. Was working in Canada under Sid Gottlieb. He ended up one of the projects dealing with LSD and with different types of mind control projects, hypnosis.
His experiments were basically two components to it. One is psychic driving, deep patterning. So deep patterning is you give massive amounts of talk to the person, like 100 plus treatments, with 6 times the usual amount of electricity per treatment. Completely wipe their minds out, so they don't know who they are, where they are, they don't recognize their children. And then once they're in that state, you can add on barbiturates and other drugs, keep them asleep, or kind of like half asleep, and then play tape loops over and over and over and over. And the tape loops will be in the doctor's voice or the person's voice, and this is all supposed to program their personality.
Some cases that Cameron held patients against their will for weeks at a time, drugged and unconscious, under the threat of if they did not participate in the treatment.
Torture on patients who had no idea this is why they were coming to him. They were people who came to him for therapy, for help. And he experimented on them as a torturer would to create new personalities.
Cameron operated, with Rockefeller funding, at the Allen Memorial Institute in Montreal, Quebec, where he contended that it was first necessary to de-pattern the minds of his patients in order for them to have a shot at recovery. He also participated in the Nuremberg trials of 1945, interviewing many of the top Nazi defendants.
After World War II and the creation of the CIA, the need for drugs that the CIA could use for other purposes increased. It turned to the Bureau of Narcotics and Harry Anslinger. And again, Anslinger anteed up Agent George White to be his lead agent in this program called MKUltra. It started basically in 1952 in New York City. I was working with a CIA officer named Sidney, chief of the technical services division, and he had access to a lot of LSD. CIA scientists had decided was the drug that they were going to focus on now. Pot wasn't considered quite potent enough to do things that they wanted to do. Mike conscripted a couple of federal narcotic agents to help him, a couple of informants, narcotic agent informants to help him, and went into the streets of New York and got a softcore pornographer named Bill to help him as well. Apparently, he had his own sexual perversions, which have been written about. He was into S&M, so he had a couple of qualifications for the job, which went beyond just being a federal agent who could perform these functions. He actually was good at acting out the sorts of things that went on in the drug underworld. In 1953, the program was formalized, and it was called Midnight Climax. And White had a safe house in New York City, which the CIA outfitted with two-way bear, with microphones and recording devices, so that White and and the CIA scientists could actually film people who had been surreptitiously dosed with LSD. The program expanded beyond LSD. And what they found out was that the safe houses themselves were probably the most valuable aspect of this program. Prostitutes that they were employed that were very
expertise in hypnotism, psychiatry, and psychology was a valuable asset to national security. A close friend of Dr. George Estabrooks, whose work in hypnoprogramming at Cornell in the 1960s was funded by the Human Ecology Fund and the Scientific Engineering Institute, both of which received funding to provide cover for operations like Midnight Climax. The CIA's MKUltra psychiatrists formed the False Memory Syndrome Foundation to obscure the facts of these covert experiments, creating confusion enough to deny acts of pedophilia, cult abuse, and other incriminating trials of CIA activities. Was a huge Dr. Horn was joined by another CIA MKUltra psychiatrist, Dr. Julian West, who was the protege of Dr. Like his esteemed MKUltra colleagues, West was infamous for his
contractors on that, Johnny West and Martin Orr, they're on the board of the False Memory Syndrome Foundation, which says that all these cases of mental personality are created by theories that all the memories are false memories.
I cannot dismiss what our intelligence agencies Romaine testifying on behalf of the CIA to Congress said, paraphrasing memory so close to word for word is unbelievable, we now know we can take a man given sufficient time to kill his mother and father and eat them in a stew.
Of those who control information through the internet, through wireless networks, through smart grids, smart devices, and smart meters to monitor and control the personal behavior of every citizen in the grid. How has the role of harnessing the minds of human resources shaped the 20th and now the 21st centuries? The single pattern emerges from all the seeming chaos. The role of science, as juxtaposed to the mind, has not been used to help individuals. Rather, at every turn, at every discovery's emergence, knowledge is being used to restrain individuals. And helplessness is just one example.
In the 1970s, discovered through these experiments with dogs. If you put a dog, two groups of dogs, in a situation, one group of dogs, they had control. When they were being shocked, they could stick their nose and hit a panel and stop the shock. And another group of dogs, they had the equal amount of shocks. No matter what they did, they couldn't control the stoppage of shocks. They discovered this phenomenon called learned helplessness in having dogs that had no control over stopping their shocks. They were passive and depressed, and they were put in another task where all the dogs actually had control over stopping their shock by jumping over this short barrier. The dogs that had learned helplessness, in other words, the dogs in the previous experiment, would learn there was nothing they can do to stop their pain. They did not bother trying.
And for his application of psychological techniques to the field of advertising.
People have a herd instinct that they move in groups. They make decisions based on emotion and feelings and desires.
Edward Bernays, the nephew of Sigmund Freud, the archetypal psychiatrist, openly bragged that there was a ruling elite that had taken control of society and that could basically program people like machines to walk off the edge of a cliff in order to do so. He was the guy that said, don't call yourself the Department of War, call yourself the Department of Defense. And he wrote book after book, like the book Propaganda in 1922. They couldn't sell pork bellies. They were seen as junk. And just wrecked this country.
Some of his most famous clients included Procter & Gamble, General Motors, General Electric, Electric, Time Magazine, NBC, and CBS.
If you look at Freud had found out how to in his own mind the idea that you could
me. It got to the point where I just said, wow, this is what I want to do more of. Deja illusions. Some of the friends just walk me in front of the TV because that's the babysitter. That is, like you had mentioned earlier, not only because of the brain waves that are controlled, but of the pictures, the images, and telling the child, hey, this is normal, this is good, that is not good. And so as a movie maker, I said, hey, get behind the camera, and I want to try something different. I want to get the truth out there. We turn this thing completely around as a film 180 degrees.
This is the interface that the globalists or the elite use to interface with the rest of the population to further their agenda. And so the media and the advertising is their tool for controlling the masses. That's the only way they can interact with all of us at a single time because there's just too many of us.
That's a great point. And through this, you can see what their worldview is, what their end game is, and what they think of us. And it's an ideal message they're pushing.
Yeah, I mean, think about what's going on right now. I mean, children nowadays, are basically, they never grow up.
Well, they're brain damaged. They're embedded in television. It lowers IQ, it dumps them down. They don't know how to communicate. They are these one-dimensional spectators.
They have no sense of self-reliance because, all the shows on TV basically show you that, to be funny and cool, basically, you shouldn't learn anything. You shouldn't actually study about anything or know about anything real.
Oh, yeah, it's not cool to be informed.
No, absolutely not. It's cool to, get drunk all the time and to, basically have no morals and no values.
I know, when you run into the general public, not false view it as one-dimensional, unhappy, not even real people. Really, actually sad.
Yeah, I mean, I used to enjoy television until I started to see the subtlety of programming, especially
manufacturing of public consent, including Walter Whitman and Ira Neal, both of whom complemented these tactics by expanding the breadth and depth of mass media entrainment of individual minds.
And then I read in 1928 a book by Walter Lippmann talking about public relation and public opinion, and basically saying the same thing, that the public is not inherently irrational, but they can use PR and propaganda and media to play upon people's existing irrationality instead of introducing them to the concepts and definitions of that which exists. So instead of creating world peace by putting everyone on the same page, by giving us a method to discern fact from fiction, they use that gap in our perception to play tricks on us. So that's all I've ever seen in human history, is human beings playing tricks on other human beings.
As for Ivy Lee, he was not only popular with some of America's most prestigious corporations and foundations, he also found time in his busy schedule to personally counsel John D. Rockefeller to represent Standard Oil, and was one of the earliest members of the Council on Foreign Relations. Moreover, in the 1930s, Ivy Lee was a consultant to Adolf Hitler, tasked with developing strategies to improve Germany's image in the United States and abroad.
Kids are impressionable. That's why here at this station, we watch the programs and commercials your child sees carefully. You may see bad guys, but not in the role of heroes. You'll learn that crime doesn't pay. Because your child's welfare is our concern, too. That's part of our code. The code of the National Association of Audience Schools.
Waco was an odd situation regarding both the law enforcement aspects of it, regarding ATF going in and doing a raid on the Branch Davidian company, as well as the fact that Special Operations Command was called to help. This is one of those situations where everything that could go wrong pretty much went wrong from day one. The Clinton administration and Janet Reno started looking for options. One of the options that they decided to engage on was bring the Special Operations Command in to advise them on quote-unquote psychological operations. When the Special Operations Command elements arrived, they began giving advice to the law enforcement individuals on how to go about implementing specific themes. Within the psychological operations community, they typically look at themes of how to modify, adapt, or somehow reshape the thinking of a target group, of an audience. These specific techniques, which were brought to bear on the Branch Davidians, were developed for military operations overseas, primarily against a foreign target. So another question has to be asked: what is the wisdom in using psychological operations techniques developed for a foreign audience against a U.S. target? Again, a very controversial issue. How do you defend yourselves against strategic information, propaganda? It's a very simple answer. Ask questions. Always check issues. I, as a public figure, am often having to speak publicly about issues and information. I look at everything. I've been criticized by my friends. Oh my God, you look at Fox News, you look at CNN. Absolutely, because the false information being provided to the mainstream outlets means something. So why are they saying things a certain way?
Are the habits of individuals changed and then reinforced to create new behaviors preferable to the collective? In the 21st century, the method has evolved little from millennia ago. Only the technology has changed. Today's television provides those who leverage public airwaves with an opportunity to control individuals far beyond the simple linguistic programming of radio.
The major point of television is the commercial. The programming is designed to kind of keep people hanging in there long enough to watch a commercial, and that they're in a more passive, zombified state to buy into the goofy, silly commercial. That is the point of it.
You are willingly subjecting yourself and your family to psychological warfare assault, not just with the semantics, not just with the messages, but the very flicker rate of the television, on record, patented to put you into a dreamlike sleep state where you're highly suggestible.
You think you're looking at a constant picture. You're really not. On modern televisions, you're looking at LEDs, and they're going on and off. Because they're going on and off, there's a brain entrainment process that takes place. To make it real simple, it comes down to this. Research shows us that the average person, when placed in front of a television set in less than 3 minutes, will go into alpha. Hypnosis is, for all intent and purposes, objectified by brainwave activity. If I'm looking at your brainwaves, an EEG, in normal consciousness, you're operating at what we think of as beta. So you're going to be 15 to 30 cycles per second. 30 is on the stress side, but that's typically where you're going to fall. In alpha, you're going to be 7 to 14 cycles per second. 8 to 14 cycles per second. Now, alpha consciousness, for all intent and purposes, is a state of hyper-suggestibility.
And it keeps people sedated. They use them in televisions are used in prisons. They're cheaper than hiring more guards. Of course, people are going to be then told that it's okay not to just have one television, but to have 3, 4 televisions in the house, that you're not watching just on a television set, but on your phone, on your laptop. And you want to normalize this kind of crazy thing of people spending 5, 6, 7 hours a day watching television.
Television has been the ultimate tool of mind control. For more than 60 years, children are set in front of it as a babysitter while they are bombarded with images of violence and decadence and corruption. And what it does is it just acclimates the child that when they see a real person dying on the street, they don't go in anger to see this happening because, oh, that's entertainment. In fact, people now have been recorded laughing at someone hurt because it's just more entertainment. They've had their basic empathy disconnected, cut off.
The role of advertising has certainly in communicating the form, function, and value of a product. The application of the behavioral and psychological sciences has played a seminal role in the way corporations now sell products to consumers in American society and internationally. In 1921, after leaving Johns Hopkins University, John B. Watson, the founder of behaviorism, took a job with the J. Walter Thompson Company, and by 1928, he was vice president of the entire firm. Watson introduced new market research techniques into advertising and discovered that sales could be influenced by manipulating images associated with brand names. For instance, blindfolded smokers could not tell the difference between a brand name and generic. J. Walter Thompson remains one of the most powerful advertising agencies in the world today.
Most people believe that you're going along through life making your own choices, making your own decisions, okay? I decide to do this, I decide to do that, I did that. By watching the brain lifetime, neuromarketers today know exactly what product to place where, how to package that product, what colors you're going to respond to, what images you're going to respond to, what kind of pre-programming already exists that they can couple it to.
And so when you have a society where people are being told at every level to consume, to buy their way into happiness, that's their only salvation, that's their only way into happiness, is to, then you have what I call a kind of fundamentalist consumerist society. How is that problematic? Why is that dangerous? Well, when you have people who only care about buying things, you're gonna make people weaker in a lot of ways. You're going to certainly make them less self-reliant. And when they're told that you just buy your way into happiness, they don't realize that you can gain strength by doing a lot of things yourself. Okay? And you also make people self-absorbed. I mean, a point of real advertising, which is the technology of consumerism, is to get people to care, over focus on every one of their needs and every one of their feelings. So if they're having a bad day, they must focus on that and focus on how depressed they are.
Billions and billions and billions of dollars have been spent publicly and publicly looking at how to tap into your psyche, how to cause you to make choices that you wouldn't otherwise make, to do things that you wouldn't otherwise do, to consume, whether it's a product or a plank in a political platform.
I've also asked the school board to make a point every day some kind of anti-violence, anti-gun That I think is clear with young people and with adults as well is that we just have to be repetitive about this. It's not enough to simply have a catchy ad on a Monday and then only do it. We have to do this every day of the week and just really brainwash people into thinking guns in a vastly different way.
With the media that's willing to report whatever the government tells it to report, that gives the government free rein to create whatever story or narrative it wants to create for whatever purpose it wants to create the story for. And that's where we're at.
That's why when you put on the 6 o'clock news, when you switch from one channel to another, they take the at the same time. They tell the same news stories, the same news stories at the same time. Go to BBC, have London, and the other same news services, and that's all kinds of news that you never hear about. Mass media today is the calling in of psychological warfare, and it is nothing but an all-out assault against the general public. When you watch mainline establishment television, you are putting yourself in front of the barrel of a gun.
Secure your copy today at Infowars.com. We're back. I'm going to talk to James Lane and Richard Grove right now. How are the ideas of Huxley's Ultimate Revolution integrated into American culture? And I want to discuss the pharmacological control of the anti-authoritarian personality. And I want to talk about what are the solutions to overcome the control.
Well, the Huxley flew into eugenics, and Aldous Huxley was a famous 20th century writer who died the same day as Jack Kennedy, oddly enough. So when you look into his writings about utopias that they were trying to create, a technotronic elite, these ideas of the ultimate revolution, that they would harness human beings and they would love their servitude through pharmaceutical methods and all these other things that he described back in 1961, these are really all reflections of MKUltra. And so when you ask who came up with these ideas of MKUltra, like that was an operational project. Whose needs was it serving? It's serving an elite class who's a predatory class. They're interest-specific kleptoparasites. They are of the same species, but they are preying on us. They are plundering our production, and they use knowledge, the knowledge gap as a power gap, as a wealth gap, and that is the harness of control.
Well, I think the pharmacological control is seen today. I mean, we've kind of got an amalgam of Brave New World in 1984. And I mean, Huxley, when you read Brave New World, I mean, this is what is happening today. I mean, they actually call one of the drugs now Soma. You know, I mean, it's like they're not even hiding that.
That's from Brave New World.
Yes, yeah, it is. And the whole agenda was laid out there. And all you have to do is, you know.
Well, it's like they're using 1984 as an instruction manual.
And so now, anybody goes in for anything. A kid is a kid. You know, we just called it daydreaming. But you know, when I was a kid, now it's like they want to shove ADD drugs down their throat. You know, anybody that goes in for the slightest thing, maybe you're having a bad day. Now all of a sudden you're diagnosed with this major disorder, and Big Pharma is giving you drugs. They're funding hospitals to where they go in, and if you want the money, well, you've got to push drugs as the only solution. And I think that this is, you know, Huxley called it how many years ago?
Unbelievable. Let's go back to the clip here, the final segment of the film, then we're going to have extras. I want to talk about solutions at the end, and then intro some of these extras, because I haven't seen these. I've seen the film. I haven't seen the extras. You tell me how good they are. So intro these for myself and everybody else when we come back. Here's the conclusion of State of Mind. Secure your copy today at Infowars.com.
Cognitive dissonance occurs when individuals lack consistency in their methods of thinking, and thus, contradictory elements attempting to reside simultaneously as fact create frustration, confusion, anger, and aggression. It is the difference between what you think the world is and what the world actually is.
Cognitive dissonance is really, again, a fancy psychologist term for, again, some common sense, which is this tension that people will experience when they have two opposing kind of ideas.
The role of psychology in advertising is to create cognitive dissonance, or the conflict between what you have and what you want. Fulfill that goal by adopting new behavior in order to achieve society can be properly dosed with mind-altering, culturally approved drugs, this cognitive dissonance may be largely assuaged. With social control as their aim, the ruling class expand their ability to influence the individual. Mind games, those of psychological warfare and advertising, were simply not enough. The opportunity existed to employ chemical treatment, physically affecting the hardware of the brain, to complement the already existing harmful software in the form of effective propaganda and advertising. The tax-free foundations, including the Carnegie and Ford Foundations, followed the lead of the Rockefeller Foundation in the widespread funding of pharmacological solutions to social control.
And they say, we will give you $1 million for your medical school if you teach pharmaceutical drugs in your medical school. So doctors come out, they're happy because they get the building, all these high-paid teachers, the best talent, the best brains you can buy, funded by tax-exempt foundation money. But what comes out of that is that the doctors are taught drugs, drugs, drugs.
Psychiatry itself as a profession is one gigantic mind control operation.
What happens when the habits demonstrated by groups of individuals reflect the outsourcing of their intelligence to so-called experts and authoritarians who are self-appointed to make decisions on their behalf?
You can have a psychiatrist testify in court that somebody has ADHD or clinically depressed or this or that. But every one of those official mental disorders is a total lie and a fraud because there is no diagnostic test for any of these disorders. Not ADHD, not bipolar, not depression, not schizophrenia, not anything that you've ever heard of that is a discrete mental disorder.
The American Psychiatric Association has a committee, and they create this thing called the DSM, their Diagnostic Bible. And they decide what goes in there. And they decide that certain people who don't pay attention to boring things have this disorder called attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. And if you accept that you have a disease, as opposed to like, well, maybe I'm somebody who can really pay attention to things that are interesting to me, but I'm somebody who's stubborn enough to not really want to pay attention to things that are boring for me. And maybe that's a good thing. That's how you maybe have something really a worthy contribution, as opposed to allowing people who are bores to fill up your whole life. You only want to listen to things that actually really are interesting for you. If you accept these ideas, though, that you have a disease or there's something essentially wrong with you, you're going to be more prey to authorities controlling you.
And some of these drugs, such as the SSRI antidepressants like Prozac, Paxil, Zoloft, and so on, are known to induce violent behavior, including suicide and homicide. And you have a professional that is seeding the country, like planting seeds in a garden and a farm. With these diagnoses and these drugs, this is Operation Chaos.
Part of the problem of psychiatry, when it comes to diagnoses, is that they really seem to have no political awareness of their pathologizing of anti-authoritarianism, of stubbornness, of rebellion. This is, I think, part of the reason for that is I think that an overwhelming number of psychiatrists, psychologists, mental health professionals are more kind of compliant people. And when they see more compliant, more stubborn, more oppositional kinds of patients, especially young people, that creates a lot of anxiety.
So you have this power, and you do this for 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, 40 years, 50 years. These little seeds, which are drugs, you say, that affect the brain in various unpredictable and horrendous ways. You have that power to do that for 50 years. Don't you think you could really call that mind control? That's mind control par excellence.
If habit is thus the enormous flywheel of society, and habit is all within the bounds of ordinance, then it is to slave us to the system, children of fortune. For their fortune exists only because of the in the right direction. How might we begin to change our lives, such that our actions will in conflict with our needs as individuals to survive and live in this world? And what will happen if we do not resist?
Heading toward a system where we're going to have economic collapse, real crisis, be much worse than anything we've seen. We're going to be in a position where most people won't understand how it came about. They won't realize that it's the result of government policies, of corrupt politicians, and so therefore they're going to go to those same corrupt politicians and endorse the same policies, and we're going to get more of the same. And that is where we're headed.
It all goes back to people who are smarter than us, who are polymaths, who are organized and have a lot of office supplies and infinite money because they can print it out of thin air and everyone else takes it and says, this is real. That's not real. Your mind is real. Objective reality is real. Wisdom is valuable because we can learn how to survive together with that. But all these things that they make us think are valuable, like petroleum or any of these other commodities, they're all fear-based. And if we just really understood what was going on and our voluntary role in it, we wouldn't play such a role in our own servitude.
So we come to a point in our lives where it's fair to ask, what was the last original thought you had? The way you walk, the way you talk, the vocabulary that you use, all of these things are built into the expectation you have of yourself based on the role you have chosen to play in the theater of life as it's been defined to you.
Well, I think we're seeing what the consequences are of just complying with everything right now, because that's what most people in America do at this point in time. The consequences are every day you're losing more of your constitutional rights, and your freedom is being taken away more and more and more by this all-encompassing security state being brought to you by your United States government.
If you out there watching don't wake up and begin to investigate these facts and prove them for yourself and take action against these people, you are not committing suicide against yourself, but against all of good humanity.
The consequences to non-resistance of control is losing everything that makes us human, that we love, that we cherish.
Now think about which laws have been passed recently to give you more rights. There aren't any. There aren't any at all.
A lot of folks who are critical thinkers, they realize how powerful this kind of giant corporate government entity is out there. And that kind of understanding that a critical thinker has can be quite painful and can lead to them being depressed and apathetic and giving up. And so we see that throughout history, that a lot of your really great critical thinkers sometimes succumb to depression and substance abuse because they're so overwhelmed, as opposed to others who figure out that conundrum, that if I'm going to be a critical thinker, I'm going to see how powerful these oppressive authorities in my life are, but I can't allow that pain to make me just kind of give up into kind of fatalism and defeatism.
Information, knowledge equals power and control.
Whatever the public face of something is, whatever they're talking about publicly, there's something else over here they're probably not looking at. And that's why it's important for individuals to look beyond what is said being presented publicly.
Input, processing, and output. What we're trying to do is keep a clean signal. That's knowledge of that which exists, and to filter out the noise. And we do that by dismissing the arbitrary, things that are insubstantial, and identifying fallacies, because the way that people can effectively lie is through words, and it's through our own belief in these words that makes it take control of our lives. So in understanding these essential aspects of how they control us, we can learn to eventually become trained into communicating amongst each other. How to do that more efficiently.
Sometimes it's true, often not.
There's only one thing that we can do to change the course from now on, and that is to recapture the system. All of the positions of power in America today, and to a large extent around the world, are in the hands of collectivists, people who believe in the very system we have. They like it.
The first thing we have to do is we have to take the schools back, and then we have to educate the kids that, hey, this happened in the past. These are the things that
You have to have a conscience, and you have to take a stand, and no matter how many people are wanting to get you in the group, don't be part of that, because you're going to lose.
And once you do that, you can have greater compassion for other people who are still being victimized, who are still believing that those who are controlling their lives actually care about them.
A large segment of the population that are so-called conspiracy theorists, but I don't have a problem with these people. They should be questioning things that are going on because we can't trust the media to accurately report stories.
Activism can help a society that's already falling under the weight of its own stupidity fall a couple of generations earlier, all right, to be able to move into a healthier society.
When you get down to the ideas of what we can do to free ourselves, you have to first look at what exists. So what exists is this system is organized, it is there to control the crowd. And if you do not resist it, you lose all individuality, you lose your identity, you outsource your thinking, you are being denied your life. And that is every bit as serious as someone trying to stab you in the back, because without your life, liberty, and the ownership of your own work and your own labor, you have no rights under their systems.
Freedom means freedom, not some freedom, but all freedom. As long as you don't take away the life, liberty, or property of your fellow man, you should be free to do everything. That's what built this. So the solution to the problem is to return to that high ideal. Return to that high ground. Then everything is possible.
You don't have to like the system you're in, and frankly, have every right to speak out against it.
Freedom of the individual is where you start. And then the individual can say, what am I going to do with my own freedom? How am I going to use my imagination and creative power to invent realities of my own in the world, as opposed to sitting back here passively and letting elites manufacture reality for me?
Humanity is worth resisting this, and if you don't stand up against these diabolical globalists, you are turning our species and our entire history and our entire future over to these people. You're betraying our ancestors who fought against incredible odds so that we might have some basic freedoms. And you're betraying yourself, your children, your family, and all future human generations. We can't turn our species over to total darkness. We can't turn our species over to people who loved our innocence and who hate beauty. We must resist the New World Order. We must free our minds and awaken the human spirit. It is time for the sleeping giant that is humanity to awaken.
Secure your copy today at Infowars.com.
Again, that concludes the premiere of State of Mind here on InfoWars at Nightly News. It will be archived at prisonplanet.tv for subscribers, and we're also going to post it on the Alex Jones channel on YouTube. But as much as they censor that, who knows if we'll even have a YouTube next week. It's getting crazy. So it's very important, so we can also make future films, to get State of Mind, The Psychology of Control, on DVD or Blu-ray at InfoWarsStore.com. You can show this to your friends and family. And also feel free to have people over to your house. Your username and passcode with prisonplanet.tv. You can watch this full presentation. I think really augments the info that are watching members of prisonplanet.tv. But I wanted to give each of you about a minute and a half or so. Crystallize any final points about the documentary.
Get this or show this to your friends and family. I think that this is a really powerful tool that you can affect through change.
Absolutely. Richard Grove?
We're all born into control, and you can't do much about it until you use your five senses, observe what's going on, identify what you need in your life. I also identify the contradictions that you don't need in your life, and make changes. Change your habits, because it's the habit that is the enormous flywheel of society. And that's how they control us.
The thing that I want to ask everyone is, stop accepting what the establishment is forcing down your throat through school and your job and everywhere else. Start questioning everything. Stop accepting the fact, or stop thinking that everything you were taught is reality. The film is really just a stepping stone, a point where you can see that there are all these branches of information that go out there, and then you can take that initiative upon yourself to go out there and research things more in depth and find out that we're not just making this up. This stuff is real. There's real information out there. Truth is truth.
Chris Emmer.
I would suggest tomorrow, all the cable company cut off your cable service. shut your TV off, read more, spend more time with your family, and get out and find out what's really going on. Don't let the media control your life.
That's right. Don't consume globalist propaganda media. Analyze it when you have to. Produce your own media. Make your own art. Be creative. Use your imagination. Think outside the box. And stand up against the globalists, because we know they're bad guys. People out there, you know you're good guys. You know you're good men and women out there. You know you care about humanity. Well, stand up and be a leader. It starts little, but we're going to be able to change the world by all of us doing little things. Going back to James Lane in closing, we're going to go back to back some clips here. Film and extras of State of Mind.
Well, we got a few. Again, we just put them in film.
Great job to all of you. A fabulous job. And, Chris, I think I've known you like 10 years. And you guys have known a couple years now. I'm just getting to know you guys. Very, very excited about what you've done. It's good to see independent filmmakers out of the gates. In just the last 2 years, put out 2 great films. So we salute everybody involved there with Mind Films. And I hope all of you will support what they've done and the InfoWars by getting it on DVD and Blu-ray at InfoWarsStore.com, exclusive distributor online of these documentary films. So here are some of the clips from the film that did not make the final cut. And then we'll see you back tomorrow night, Lord willing, on the Thursday edition of InfoWars 96.
Secure your copy today. Infowars.com.
Society people don't exist anymore, do they? They do. He wrote about them. And he said that he had no aversion to this secret society. In fact, he said he had been invited into its inner ranks. He was never a member of the elite. He was brought in as a historian, you might say, to record the aversion to it or its goals or its policies. He said, the only thing I disagree with is that they have to remain secret. Most wars for enhancement of power and wealth on the part of the elites that run those governments. They want to expand their influence, greater dominance. They want the natural resources. In other words, they're not for reasons that we have been told. It's a fact of life. And there's no clearer example of that, I believe, than in World War I and, of course, in World War II. But I should remember it was World War I. The American people at that time were very complacent about the war going on in Europe. It was a war between Germany and France and England. Okay, I'm sorry about that, but leave us out of it. We declared our neutrality and everything, and we just said, well, you guys work it out real soon, which is the way we're supposed to be. There was no particular national interest on our part to be involved in that war. We weren't that. And besides, according to our Constitution, the only purpose of our government was to protect us, to protect our lives, our liberty, and our property. If it didn't touch in those areas, we're out of it because the Constitution forbids that power to the government. Anyway, that's how the American scene was at that time. And people in finance and in government really had a different point of view because, you see, J.P. Morgan at that time was the bond broker for the British bonds. The British government was trying to raise money. In addition to taxes, they were borrowing it through bonds, so they were issuing bonds. And J.P. Morgan was given the franchise to sell those bonds in America. They sold a lot of them.
Advertisers have done is they've looked at Freud and psychology. they looked at the id, the ego, the superego, the thanatos, they looked at the conflict that Freud discussed that human beings live in, the psychic tension, the impossibility to live up to the requirements of a superego, a perfect parent, the libidinal urges that drive us toward sexual impulses and gross behavior that we have been trained, and fortunately so, to harness and find socially acceptable ways to act out. Now, because they're aware of this tension, because they're aware of this heightened arousal, this anxiety, they look at how they can tweak it, how they can play it. For example, I can cause an arousal and associate that arousal with a product just as with building that I can get. Maybe think back to Kennedy's words. It's what you can give. Don't ask what you can get from your country, but what you can give your country. Don't get up in the morning with how much do I get, but what can I give? Give your gifts. It doesn't matter if you're an attorney, you're a doctor, you're a plumber, you're an auto mechanic. When you do your very best to help that person that comes to you as a customer, not to take their money, but to help them, to sincerely help them, you make a difference. Doing your very best is as close as you're ever going to get to being your very best. Cheating yourself by whatever means, whether it's on your taxes or not keeping your word or cheating yourself, is cheating yourself. I'll say it again. Doing your best is as close as you'll ever get to being your very best, and there's very few of us that achieve that.
The fact that I can speak here freely to you, to all of us, is a great, I think, indescribable benefit of our society, one that we should defend tirelessly. The idea of free speech, free expression, is the best antiseptic against manipulation, against propaganda, against information operation. That's why it's so critical that we as citizens always try to seek the truth, always try to be true to what's best for the country, because human, versus what may be good for the short-term benefit. The idea of short-term gain, basically giving up freedoms. Giving up freedoms is never a good idea. And frankly, once you give them up, it's always harder to find them again in the long run. Sure. How does one defend himself against strategic information, propaganda? It's a very simple answer. Always check your sources. possible to seek the truth. And frankly, you know, people, I think, are smart enough to understand when something's true and something's not. I guess you could call it your spidey sense. If something doesn't look right or smell right, it probably isn't right. So go with that. Try to understand why you feel that way. Always ask questions. Never accept simply what is presented at face value. Brent Lott spoke to here in 2005. His thing has resonated. There's 2 points he wanted to he offered 2 points of advice. First point of advice was, in Washington, D.C., in this town where we're talking right now, never go to your telephone. Well, we found out through Able Danger and the fact that we were so cutting edge, people didn't want to hear what we had to say. And frankly, when it became public knowledge, people didn't want to talk about it. So that lesson was absolutely correct. Senator Lott was absolutely correct. The second lesson he taught me, and this is something that I'm still learning today, he advised me that whatever they're talking about publicly, whatever the issue is in the news, whatever the information is about that topic, it's really about something else entirely. Whatever they're talking about publicly, it's something else over here they're probably not talking about. And that's why it's important for individuals to look beyond what is said in the news or the public and try to figure out for themselves what's really going on.
Secure your copy today at Infowars.com.
Now you can watch the Alex Jones Show live in cabins at Infowars.com/show.
You'll find links to all of our content there and a free 15-day trial for Prison Planet TV.
More than 60 movies and documentaries all in one place at Infowars.com/show.